I walked into the company dinner, excited to celebrate another successful year, but everything changed in an instant. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was standing right there in front of me, kissing another man. I couldn't believe my eyes. I froze, my heart racing, as I walked straight up to them and said, "You just destroyed our marriage." Her response? It wasn't what I expected. What she said next left me absolutely stunned, and in that moment, I realized the truth was far worse than I could ever imagine. Keep watching, because this isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about love and trust. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching in disbelief as my wife, Laura, kissed a man I had never seen before. My body was frozen, but my mind was racing. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. The world around me seemed to blur as everything became so surreal. For a split second, I wondered if I had imagined it, if I had misinterpreted what I was seeing. But the taste of reality hit me like a cold slap across the face. It was real. This wasn't just a fleeting moment. My legs moved before I could even fully process what was happening. I pushed past the crowd of people standing around the bar, barely aware of the confused looks and hushed whispers. My eyes stayed fixed on them. Laura's lips pressed against this man's with an intimacy that felt like a knife stabbing through my chest. She looked at him with that unmistakable affection, the kind I thought was only reserved for me. I reached them in what felt like an eternity, my heart thundering in my chest. It was as if time had slowed, the seconds stretching longer than they should have. I opened my mouth, but no words came out at first. My throat was tight with emotion, my breath shallow as I tried to catch up with the flood of feelings threatening to overwhelm me. Anger. Confusion. Betrayal. It all hit at once, but none of it made sense. Laura pulled away from the man, startled by my sudden presence. The shock on her face was brief, and she quickly masked it with that practiced smile of hers, one I had seen far too many times over the years. "Mark," she said, her voice trying to sound calm, but I could hear the faint quiver in her words. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't contain the frustration that erupted inside of me. "What am I doing here? What the hell are you doing here?" I spat. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care. This wasn't about politeness anymore. This was about trust, the trust she had just completely shattered in front of me. She stepped back, crossing her arms in an almost defensive manner, a typical move whenever she was caught in a lie. The man beside her, still standing there, looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to do or say. It was almost like he didn't know who I was, like he had no idea I was her husband. That thought alone made my blood boil. I didn't wait for her to speak again. I couldn't. I needed answers. I wanted to hear her admit it. "Who is this guy, Laura?" I demanded, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Her eyes flickered nervously, and for a moment, I saw something in them, something I had never seen before, guilt. But it quickly faded, replaced by the same cold mask she always wore when trying to protect herself. "Mark, calm down. It's not what you think," she said, her voice now full of that rehearsed sweetness that made my blood run cold. "Not what I think?" The words echoed in my mind. How could she say that? How could she stand there and look me in the eye after what I had just witnessed and lie to me so easily? I could feel my hands trembling, but I couldn't stop myself. "Don't lie to me, Laura. I saw what just happened. I saw you kiss him, like you've kissed me so many times before." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she straightened up, trying to appear composed. "Mark, please. You're overreacting. This isn't a big deal. We're just friends. Just friends." My heart sank at the utter absurdity of her words. I had known her for years, years of shared moments, promises, vows. And now she was telling me this man was just a friend? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Friends? Really? I said, my voice now barely above a whisper, the hurt seeping through. You expect me to believe that? Laura's face flushed with irritation. You never understand, Mark, she said, shaking her head. We've grown apart. This is nothing. You don't get it. I've been trying to tell you for months, but you never listen. Months? The words hit me like a hammer. Months of what? Behind my back? She had been hiding this from me for months. My mind scrambled to make sense of it all. All the late nights at work, all the meetings she had supposedly been attending. I had thought she was just busy, but now I realized I had been a fool. I wanted to shout, to demand that she explain, but the truth was, I already knew. Deep down, I knew the reality I was facing. She had been seeing this man, someone, for a long time. And she wasn't sorry. Not at all. Laura, I said, my voice cold now, a calmness settling over me. If this is how you feel, just admit it. Don't lie to me anymore. Don't try to cover it up with excuses. She took a deep breath, clearly frustrated, but then she said the words that broke me completely. I don't want this anymore, Mark. I'm done. I've been done for a while. I don't love you anymore. I haven't for a long time. I froze. Those words stung more than anything else. To hear her say it so easily, so coldly, as though our entire life together meant nothing, it was too much to bear. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the dismissal of everything we had built, everything I had believed in. Her words echoed in my ears, growing louder with each passing second. I don't love you anymore. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, to confront her about everything, the lies, the deceit, the manipulation, but I couldn't find my voice. All I could do was stand there, feeling the world crumble around me. I stood there, numb, my mind reeling from her words. I don't love you anymore. The sentence played on a loop inside my head, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. It felt as though the ground beneath me had been ripped away, leaving me hovering in the air, lost in a void. Everything I had believed in, every promise, every touch, every shared memory, was nothing but a lie. Her words echoed in my ears, and I couldn't look away from her. Laura. The woman I had trusted, the woman I thought would be by my side for the rest of my life. And here she was, standing in front of me with a stranger at her side, a man who had taken my place in her heart. I tried to breathe, to steady myself, but the air felt thick and suffocating. My vision blurred as tears threatened to spill, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not now. Not after everything she had done. So that's it, then? I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. You've just decided that's the end of us? Just like that? Laura crossed her arms over her chest, her expression unreadable, like she had already moved on. Yes, Mark. It's over. I can't pretend anymore. I don't want this life with you. I don't want you. The finality in her tone made my stomach churn. This wasn't some fleeting moment of anger, some temporary lapse in judgment. She had made up her mind. And worse, she didn't even seem remorseful. I could see it in her eyes, the coldness, the indifference. It was as if I was nothing more than a stranger to her now. You're serious? I whispered, barely able to get the words out. My throat felt tight, suffocated by the weight of everything I had just learned. She nodded without hesitation, the hardness in her gaze unwavering. Yes, Mark. I'm serious. And frankly, I don't owe you any more explanations. The last part stung the most. I had spent years trying to understand her, to connect with her. And now, she was throwing it all away with a single sentence, as though everything we had shared was meaningless. I looked over at the man standing next to her. His expression was one of discomfort, but he didn't seem the least bit ashamed. In fact, he barely even acknowledged me, as if he were completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. My blood boiled as I realized how little respect he had for me, for the life I thought I had built with Laura. It was as if he was enjoying watching me squirm, knowing full well what he had taken from me. "Who is he, Laura?" I asked, my voice breaking through the storm of emotions inside me. She glanced at the man briefly before looking back at me, her expression a mix of defiance and annoyance. "His name is Jake. He's someone I've been seeing for a while now. And to be honest, he's the one I want to be with, not you." I felt the blood rush from my head, my body swaying slightly as the full weight of her words hit me. She had been seeing this man behind my back, lying to me every time she said she was working late or going out with friends. All those nights she spent busy were nothing but a cover for her affair with Jake. I couldn't believe it. She had kept this from me for so long, and I had been too blind to see it. "I don't even know what to say," I muttered, the words coming out in a hollow, disbelieving tone. "I trusted you, Laura. I thought we were happy. How could you do this to me?" She didn't flinch at my words. If anything, she seemed more irritated than anything else. "You weren't paying attention, Mark. You were too busy with work, with your own life." I felt neglected. I felt alone. And when Jake came along, he made me feel alive again. He made me feel wanted. Each word felt like a slap in the face, each accusation cutting deeper than the last. She was blaming me for her actions, for her betrayal. It was like she was trying to make me feel guilty for the fact that she had chosen another man over me, that she had decided to destroy our marriage without even considering the impact it would have on me. Neglected? I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. "So, instead of talking to me about it, instead of trying to work through our problems, you just, what? You just find someone else to fill the void? That's how you solve things?" Laura shrugged nonchalantly, as if she had no regrets about what she was doing. "It wasn't like that, Mark. I'm not the only one who's been unhappy. You've been checked out for years. You just didn't see it." I wanted to scream, to shake some sense into her, but I didn't. I stayed silent, each of her words adding fuel to the fire that was slowly consuming me. How could she be so cold? So heartless? "So, this is it then?" I asked, my voice now steady, but the anger burning in my chest was palpable. "You're just throwing everything away, just like that?" She looked at me, her face a mask of indifference. "Yes. I am." The finality in her voice was like a knife twisting in my gut. And in that moment, I realized, there was no turning back. My marriage was over. And no matter how much I tried to fight it, I couldn't change what was happening. "Fine," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "If that's how you feel, then there's nothing more to say." I turned away, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked away from her, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything she had done, the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. But the worst part? She didn't even seem to care. And as I left the room, I couldn't help but wonder, how could I have been so blind? I stepped out of the crowded dinner hall, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of everything that had just unfolded. The air outside felt colder than usual, the chill cutting through me like a knife. But it wasn't just the weather. It was the weight of Laura's betrayal that had taken root in my chest, a feeling so heavy that I could hardly breathe. I walked aimlessly, my footsteps echoing in the empty street, the sound of them the only thing that anchored me to reality. My mind kept replaying the events from earlier, the kiss, the lies, the coldness in her voice when she said she didn't love me anymore. Each moment felt like a punch to the gut, a sharp reminder that everything I thought I knew about my life had been a lie. I couldn't believe it. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? All those late nights, all those business trips that she'd gone on, it was all starting to make sense now. But even knowing the truth didn't make it any easier to accept. I had been a fool, trusting her when I should have been paying attention. And then there was Jake, the man she had been seeing behind my back. I couldn't stop thinking about him. What did he have that I didn't? Was I not enough for her anymore? The questions kept circling in my head, but no matter how much I searched for answers, I couldn't find any that made sense. I walked past the dimly lit streetlights, my mind consumed by the anger and frustration that I couldn't seem to shake. I tried to tell myself it was over. That I was better off without her. But it wasn't that simple. I had loved her. I had given her everything, my time, my trust, my heart, and now she had just tossed it all aside for a man who didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. I stopped in front of a park bench, the weight of the night finally catching up to me. I sank down onto the bench, my hands gripping the sides as I stared at the ground. The tears that had been threatening to spill all night finally fell, but I didn't care. I didn't care if anyone saw me. I didn't care about anything anymore. For the first time in years, I felt utterly alone. It wasn't just the fact that Laura had cheated on me, it was the way she had done it. The way she had treated me like I didn't matter. She had made excuses for her actions, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong between us. But the truth was, it wasn't my fault. It was hers. She had chosen this path. She had made the decision to lie, to deceive, to betray the person who loved her. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't let her see me like this. I couldn't let anyone see me this vulnerable. But even as I tried to pull myself together, I couldn't escape the sting of her words. I don't love you anymore. The finality of those words echoed in my head, louder than anything else. I thought about calling her. Asking her to explain. But I knew it wouldn't matter. She had made her choice, and no amount of pleading was going to change that. She had already moved on. And I was just left behind. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, not just from her, but from myself. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have trusted her so completely, only for her to destroy everything we had with a few careless actions? I thought back to the early days of our relationship. We had been inseparable. We had laughed, loved, and dreamed of a future together. But now, all of that felt like a distant memory, something that belonged to someone else, someone who was no longer part of my life. It hurt more than I ever imagined it would. I had thought we were happy. But now I saw the truth, the cracks in our marriage that I had ignored, the lies she had told me. I had trusted her with everything, and she had thrown it all away for a man who wasn't worth it. I stood up from the bench, my legs shaky, my mind still clouded with disbelief. I needed to do something, anything, to take my mind off the pain. But what was there to do? I couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't make her take back the lies, the deceit. All I had left were memories of a time when things were good, memories that now seemed tainted, as if they were nothing more than a figment of my imagination. I wanted to confront Laura again, to demand answers, but I knew it would be pointless. She had already made her decision, and nothing I said could change that. It was over. She had moved on, and now I had to learn to do the same. But how? How do you move on when the person you loved has just ripped your heart out and stomped on it without a second thought? I couldn't answer that question. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I couldn't keep torturing myself with the same questions, the same doubts. I had to let go, no matter how much it hurt. I took one last look at the empty street, the city around me fading into the background as I tried to gather the strength to move forward. But for now, all I could do was keep walking, step by step, away from the life I once knew, towards something unknown. Something better, I hoped. But for now, the pain was still fresh. And it would take time to heal. The days that followed were a blur. After that night, I couldn't seem to focus on anything. Work was a struggle. I'd stare at my computer screen, but my mind would wander to that moment, Laura, kissing another man. I saw their faces, heard their laughter, and I couldn't shake the sick feeling in my stomach. I had given so much of myself to her. And now, it was all gone, taken away in an instant. I couldn't escape the questions. Why hadn't I noticed? Why hadn't I seen the signs before? But the deeper I looked, the more I realized how easily I had been fooled. Laura had always been good at hiding things, good at putting on that perfect front for everyone else. I hadn't questioned her, because I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to believe in us. But now, I could see the cracks that had been there all along. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the subtle manipulations, the way she had made me feel guilty for not giving her enough attention when I was doing everything I could. She had played me. And I had fallen for it. It wasn't just the betrayal of her body that hurt, it was the betrayal of trust, the manipulation, the way she had used me to get what she wanted. She had been leading a double life, and I hadn't seen a thing. I found myself pacing in my apartment, restless and angry. I was furious at her, furious at myself. But there was something else, something darker, growing inside me. A part of me wanted answers. I needed to know how long this had been going on. I needed to know why she had thrown it all away for a man like Jake. I had to see her again. I couldn't let this go until I had the truth. So, I called her. "Mark, why are you calling me?" Her voice on the other end of the line was cold, almost as if she had already moved on, as if I was nothing but an inconvenience. But I didn't care. I wasn't calling to beg for her back. I wasn't calling for her to apologize. I was calling for the truth. "I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need answers. And I'm not leaving until I get them." She hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Fine. Meet me at the old cafe, the one on Main Street. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up the phone and sat down, the weight of the upcoming conversation heavy on my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't just let it go. I had to confront her, not just about the affair, but about everything. Everything she had hidden from me. Everything I had missed. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, her eyes fixed on the coffee cup in front of her. She didn't look up as I approached. She was the picture of calm, as if nothing had happened, as if we were still the couple we used to be. But I couldn't play along anymore. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay. Not after what she had done. I sat down across from her, my eyes locked onto hers, and I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. I wanted her to look at me, to feel the weight of what she had done, to see the pain she had caused. But she didn't. She just sat there, cool and composed, as if she hadn't just shattered my entire world. Finally, I spoke. "How long, Laura? How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, and I could see the guilt flash across her face, but it was quickly masked by that same cold, indifferent expression. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's over. I'm with Jake now. You need to move on." "You don't get to do this," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You don't get to just throw it all away and act like it was nothing. You owe me the truth. You owe me an explanation." She let out a deep sigh, her fingers tapping against the side of her coffee cup. "I don't owe you anything, Mark. I've already explained myself. You were too busy with your work, too focused on yourself to see what was happening. I needed someone who could give me attention, who could make me feel good about myself." The words hit me like a slap in the face. She was blaming me for her actions. She was blaming me for the fact that she had cheated on me. And it wasn't just the affair, it was the way she had twisted everything, turned it all around so that I was the one who was at fault. I clenched my fists, trying to control the anger that was building inside me. That's what you tell yourself, isn't it? That it was all my fault? That you didn't have the strength to talk to me, to fix things, so you just went and found someone else to fill the void? Her eyes flickered again, but she quickly regained her composure. It's not that simple, Mark. You don't understand. I was lonely. I was trapped. You didn't see it. You never saw it. I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. You were lonely? You were trapped? You don't think I was lonely too? You don't think I felt like I was losing you? But I didn't cheat on you. I didn't go running to someone else. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt. But instead, you just made excuses, and now you're sitting here, blaming me for everything. She didn't say anything for a moment, her eyes meeting mine with a hardness that I hadn't seen before. Maybe I don't feel guilty anymore. Maybe I'm tired of pretending. I've made my choice, Mark. I'm done with you. The finality in her words hit me like a freight train, and for a moment, I didn't know what to do. But then, I realized something. I had been holding on to her for so long, hoping that she would change, hoping that she would realize what she had thrown away. But it was clear now. She was never going to change. And I couldn't keep holding on to a lie. I stood up, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. Fine, I said, my voice steady. It's over. I turned and walked out of the cafe, the door closing behind me with a finality that matched the end of our relationship. I had gotten my answers. But the truth was, it didn't matter. There was no going back. And as I stepped into the night, the weight of everything we had shared finally lifted from my shoulders. It hurt, but I was free. The days following the confrontation with Laura were some of the darkest of my life. After everything that had been said, after the hurtful words, the cold dismissal of our marriage, I was left to pick up the shattered pieces of my life. It wasn't just the fact that she had betrayed me, it was the realization that she had been lying to me for so long. She had spun a web of deceit, and I had been caught in it without even knowing. I tried to throw myself into work, thinking that maybe if I kept myself busy, I could push everything to the back of my mind. But it didn't work. Every time I looked at my phone, every time I passed a familiar place, I couldn't help but think about her, about us. How had we gone from being so happy, so in love, to this? How had she changed so much? I couldn't stop asking myself these questions, but the more I thought about it, the more the answers seemed to elude me. The anger inside me kept bubbling up, and I didn't know how to let it out. I was furious at her. Furious that she had chosen someone else over me. Furious that she had made me feel worthless. But at the same time, there was a deep sense of sadness, a loss that I couldn't seem to shake. I kept replaying the words she had said to me in the cafe, "I'm done with you." It was like a constant echo in my mind, a reminder that no matter how much I wanted to fix things, no matter how much I wanted to make her see the mistake she had made, it wasn't going to happen. She had made up her mind, and she had already moved on. But the hardest part wasn't the fact that she had left me. It was the way she had made me feel. She had made me feel like I was nothing. Like I didn't matter. And that, more than anything else, was what hurt the most. I found myself drifting through life in a haze, not sure what I was supposed to do next. The apartment felt empty without her. The bed felt cold, as if it had lost its warmth. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of her, the pictures we had taken together, the little things we had shared. It all felt like a cruel joke. How could everything that had been so good turn so bad? One evening, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. My eyes looked tired, bloodshot. My face was drawn, the weight of everything I had been carrying showing in every line, every wrinkle. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being able to handle anything that came my way. But now? Now, I was broken. I thought about calling her again. Maybe if I just heard her voice, maybe if I could just talk to her one more time, I could get the closure I needed. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't help. She had already made it clear that she didn't want to talk, that she had moved on. She had moved on to Jake, and no amount of pleading from me would change that. I felt so powerless. Like everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, had been stolen away from me in the blink of an eye. I was left standing there, with nothing but the wreckage of what used to be a life. But something inside me, deep down, knew that I couldn't let this consume me. I couldn't stay in this dark place forever. I had to figure out how to move on, how to rebuild myself from the ashes of my past. But where to start? I decided to take a walk. Sometimes, when things got too overwhelming, I just needed to clear my head. The streets were quiet as I walked, the soft hum of the city's nighttime noises filling the air. I wasn't sure where I was going, but it didn't matter. The cold breeze felt good on my face, like it was washing away the heaviness that had settled in my chest. As I walked, I tried to focus on anything other than Laura. I noticed the small details, the way the trees swayed in the wind, the distant sounds of people laughing in a nearby cafe. Little things that I hadn't paid attention to in so long. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just the realization that I was still alive, that I was still here, even though everything felt like it was falling apart. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how to fix the mess that Laura had left behind. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was never going to come back. I thought about the future, about what I wanted for myself. It wasn't going to be easy. I was going to have to work through the pain, through the anger and sadness, but I couldn't let it define me. I couldn't let Laura's betrayal be the end of my story. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of determination. I wasn't going to let her have the final say in my life. I was going to take control. I was going to rebuild myself, piece by piece, until I was stronger than before. The walk back to my apartment felt different. I felt different. Like I had taken the first step toward healing, toward moving forward. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. The pain was still there. The memories were still fresh. But for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. As I entered my apartment, I closed the door behind me, taking a deep breath. The silence in the room was deafening, but it didn't feel as suffocating as it had before. I was still here. And that, in itself, was a victory. It's strange how the mind works. One moment, you're lost in a whirlwind of emotions, drowning in heartbreak, and the next, you begin to claw your way back to reality, forced to face the fact that the life you knew is no longer there. That's where I found myself, at the crossroads of who I was before Laura and who I was becoming after her betrayal. I spent days in a fog, not knowing what I was doing, who I was. But as time passed, it became clear that I couldn't keep living like this. The grief, the anger, the feeling of being abandoned, they were all consuming me. But somewhere deep inside, I knew I had to let go of the darkness. I had to stop being the victim of my own story. I started small. I began by simply getting out of bed and taking a walk every morning. At first, it felt like a monumental task. The weight of the world still felt like it was on my shoulders. But little by little, I started to feel a spark. Not a large flame, but a flicker of something that had been buried for so long. That was when I decided to make a change. I needed to break free from the remnants of my past life with Laura. I needed to find myself again, outside of the identity I had wrapped around being her husband. I wasn't just Mark, the guy who had been left behind. I was more than that. And I had to prove it to myself. I joined a gym. Something simple, something that would push me physically and give me a sense of accomplishment. I started lifting weights again, a hobby I had once enjoyed but had abandoned as Laura and I grew more settled into our life together. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could focus on something other than the mess inside my head. Each rep, each set, was a way to release the anger that was still simmering under the surface. Every drop of sweat felt like a small victory, a sign that I was reclaiming control over my own life. I also began reaching out to old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I was surprised by how easily they welcomed me back, how many of them had noticed the distance I'd put between myself and everyone else over the past few months. They didn't ask questions about Laura. They didn't judge. They simply invited me into their lives again. It was refreshing. But even with these small steps forward, the shadow of Laura's betrayal lingered. There were moments, quiet moments when I was alone, where her face would flash in my mind, and the anger would rise again. But instead of letting it consume me, I learned to push it away. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I wasn't going to let the pain of the past hold me prisoner. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I was 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. But it was progress. Real progress. One evening, I found myself sitting in a cafe, sipping coffee, watching the people around me. I used to come here with Laura. We would talk about everything, our hopes, our fears, our plans for the future. But now, the cafe didn't hold any of those memories. It had become just another place in the world, a backdrop for me to heal. That was when I saw him. Jake. The man who had been the catalyst for everything. The man who had taken my place in Laura's life. He was sitting across the room, talking to a woman, laughing, as though the world was his oyster. I knew it was him before he even looked up. I could feel the tension building in me. Part of me wanted to get up and confront him, demand answers from him. But I didn't. Instead, I sat back in my chair, watching him for a moment longer. I realized that I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to do anything to him. He was just a man. A man who had his own life, his own issues. He wasn't the problem. The problem was the relationship I had had with Laura, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. Jake was just an actor in a play I had been too blind to see. For the first time since the whole ordeal began, I felt a sense of peace. The anger that had been consuming me for weeks slowly melted away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't angry at Laura. I wasn't angry at Jake. I was angry at myself. Angry for not seeing the truth sooner. Angry for giving so much of myself to someone who couldn't see the value in it. But that anger was fleeting. It was just a moment. A moment that would pass. And in its place, I felt something else growing. Something stronger. Something that felt like freedom. I realized then that I didn't need closure. I didn't need Laura or Jake to apologize. I didn't need anything from them. What I needed was to move on. To create a life for myself, separate from them. To redefine who I was without them. And that, I knew, would take time. I stood up from my table, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. I had made peace with the situation. Not in the way I had imagined, not in the way I had hoped, but in a way that felt right for me. I was ready to move forward. As I walked out of the cafe, I breathed in the cool evening air. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked in. I was stronger now. Wiser. And I was ready to face whatever came next. I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. The months that followed were both challenging and liberating. The idea of rebuilding myself, of rebuilding my life after everything that had happened with Laura, felt like an impossible task at first. I had no roadmap, no clear path. All I had was the determination to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And slowly, the weight of the past began to lift. I threw myself into my work even more. I threw myself into my physical health, joining a new fitness class that pushed me harder than I had ever been pushed before. I spent hours in the gym, lifting weights until my muscles burned, feeling like I could finally start to reclaim control over my body, the one thing in my life that still felt solid. I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I had everything I needed within myself. But there were still moments when the memories of Laura, of our life together, would come flooding back. There were nights when I would sit alone in my apartment, staring at the empty walls, and the loneliness would hit me like a wave. The silence in the apartment felt suffocating, and I would wonder if I was ever going to feel truly at peace again. But I refused to give in. I refused to let those memories hold me captive. The real breakthrough came one afternoon when I was out running. I had been running regularly, trying to clear my head, to push the mental limits just as I was pushing my physical limits. But that particular afternoon, something shifted. I was on my usual route, but instead of thinking about the past or the people who had hurt me, I found myself focusing on the rhythm of my steps, the air filling my lungs, the feeling of the pavement beneath my feet. I had spent so much of the last few months trapped in a mental prison, obsessed with Laura, obsessed with the betrayal. But in that moment, I realized something important: I had been missing the present. I had been so focused on what had happened that I had lost sight of what I could still achieve. I stopped running for a moment, standing still on the path, taking in my surroundings. The trees, the sky, the sound of the birds in the distance, it was all there for me to enjoy. It was as though the universe had opened my eyes, showing me that I still had the power to shape my future. That power was mine to take back. From that moment on, I became more intentional with my life. I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to live again. I wanted to enjoy life for what it was, and I knew I couldn't keep letting the past define me. It had taken a while to get there, but I finally began to feel the excitement of possibility again. I took up new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but had never made time for. I learned to cook better, trying out new recipes every week. I started reading more, diving into books that challenged my thinking and opened my mind. I even took up photography, something I had always admired but never thought I had the patience for. But with each click of the camera, I felt like I was capturing a piece of my own journey, a journey of rediscovery. But perhaps the most important change was that I allowed myself to be vulnerable again. I started meeting new people, reconnecting with old friends, and slowly opening myself up to the idea of new relationships. Not necessarily romantic ones, though I wasn't ruling that out, but just connecting with people in a way that felt real. I wasn't afraid to show the world who I truly was anymore. I wasn't hiding behind a mask of pain and regret. I was ready to move forward, with or without Laura. And one evening, a few months later, I found myself having dinner with a woman I had met at a mutual friend's gathering. Her name was Emma. She was kind, intelligent, and most importantly, she made me laugh. It wasn't that I was looking for someone to replace Laura, I wasn't trying to fill the void in my heart with someone new. But for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to enjoy someone else's company, to let someone else into my life. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a while, I felt a genuine connection. It was nothing serious, nothing that I felt pressured to define. But I realized something that night. I realized that I was ready to love again, to open myself up to the possibility of finding happiness in places I hadn't considered before. And that was a huge step forward. It wasn't about replacing the love I had lost. It was about learning that I still had the capacity to love, that I was worthy of love, and that life could still surprise me in the most unexpected ways. I had spent so much of my life looking backward, stuck in the pain of what had been, but now, I was beginning to look forward. But even as I felt myself moving on, there were still moments of doubt, moments when I would question my decision to let go of Laura, to walk away from everything we had built together. It wasn't an easy decision, and sometimes, I wondered if I had done the right thing. But I knew deep down that I had no choice. I had to walk away from someone who no longer cared about me, from a relationship that had been built on lies and deceit. As I drove home that evening, the conversation with Emma still fresh in my mind, I reflected on how far I had come. I wasn't the same person I was when Laura had first betrayed me. I had changed. I had grown. And though I still carried some scars from the past, I knew they didn't define me. I wasn't defined by my failures, my heartbreak, or the people who had let me down. I was defined by how I picked myself back up, by how I chose to live, despite everything that had happened. I had learned to trust myself again. I had learned that the only person I truly needed to rely on was me. And I was stronger now, stronger than I had ever been. I parked the car in front of my apartment, stepped out into the cool night air, and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Hopeful about the future, about what was still to come. This is not the end of my story. It's just the beginning.